Okay, so hello, welcome back to another Unity multiplayer devlog. This will be episode 3 in the devlog series where I'll be showing you what I've got done over the Christmas holidays. I've made quite a few changes to the spell system, I've added a few more spells that all do something a little bit different. I hope you're looking forward to it, so let's get started. So as usual, I'll start off by just showing you the game. So let's go into a lobby. I've got 2 clients over here on my main monitor and another 2 on my side monitor. So if I join on all these, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the school of magic that I want each to be. So we'll go with pyromancy here, hydromancy here. The text should probably be adjusted with the size. We've got geomancy and we've got aeromancy. So I'm going to ready everyone up. And then we'll jump into the game. So start game. And you'll notice it's all spawning in here in the middle. So if we look at the client over here on the left, you'll notice this floating number here, 5 out of 5, and over here you'll notice 6 out of 6 on the second client, and that's how many charges we have of our basic attack. And at the moment it's just currently floating because I haven't made it work with the different resolutions. I've just had to squish it into a square so you can fit multiple on the screen. But if I fire my basic attack now, if I left click, it'll shoot a fireball for this character, and when the fireball hits terrain or hits anything, it will explode doing AoE damage, and it will also apply a burn. And you'll notice when I shoot, the 5 goes down to 4, goes down to 3, 2, 1, and when it runs out, you have to wait a little bit for it to recharge, and then you can start again. And if I just stop at 3 for the same duration of time, it'll fill back up. And that happens for all the different characters. And the reason I do this is because we've got the fire here, which is relatively slow and does high damage. But if I switch over here to one of the other ones, let's look at the character over here who's running around. I've selected air for him, aeromancy, and the air attack has 8 charges and they attack really fast. So if I do this now, if I go and attack that dummy on the right, these 3 down here are just training dummies. So if I shoot the one on the right, I can hold down left click and I can shoot 8 really fast. It waits for the recharge, then I can shoot 8 again, wait for the recharge. And this allows me to tweak the balance of each of the different schools because each school of magic has its own basic attack. So like I showed, the air is just small pellets that go pew 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 really fast. And then if I come back over here for the fire, I'm going to actually hit the enemies now. I'll hit the one in the middle. Let's get a bit closer. You can see the health bars. They're currently all stacked up because they're too close. But if I hit the guy in the middle, it'll do the AoE damage and it'll hit all of them. And you'll also notice the health ticking down after the initial impact damage because it applies a burn. There's no visuals for this yet, but you can see it happening because of the health bars. And when these dummies die, they actually just go back up to full health, so I don't have to keep respawning them in. They just stay here for me to test spells on. So we've got the instant fireball AoE with a burn. We've got the air attack that's just small but really fast. If I go over here to the second client, I think we chose hydromancy. So for the water attack, it's still all just spheres for the time being, but it'll shoot a sphere, and it'll shoot it with gravity as an arc. So I can imagine this being some kind of water ball effect, where you'll just see a ball of water flying through the air with like a trail with stuff dripping down, or whatever idea I come up with for that. But this actually arcs, so you have to aim a little bit up for the projectile to hit. If I obviously aim, maybe let's say at the legs, the projectile actually just ends up hitting the floor instead because it drops down. And then the final one I've got over here, I'm actually going to move it onto my main monitor. Let's move the earth over here. So for this one, it's similar to water where it has fall off, but it has less fall off, it does more damage, and I've added channeling. So for this spell, when I click, it will actually start a cast bar that fills up, and then when the cast bar finishes, it'll shoot off the rock, like so. So of course at the moment this is all just a work in progress. Each school only has 1 spell, and they're all basic attack spells with the idea of you start with this, everyone has that spell for your own class, and you can just keep using this over and over again. You can use it all the time. They have very short cooldowns. And then the other spells that I'll be making over time will be obviously a lot cooler, and they might play into your basic attack. So maybe the rock spell, when it collides, will shatter into some rock fragments, and your other earth spells might consume rock fragments to, for example, build a barrier, like a shield or a wall or something like that. Obviously, that's a little bit further down the line, but that's the kind of idea I have in mind. I think a good thing to show now would be the differences in how I've actually set up each of these spells to work. So let me close these builds and we'll jump into the editor. So here we are in the editor, and if you notice down here you'll see spell 5. I haven't finished making this spell yet, but the next thing I want is a way to actually target spells where you can hit a spell and then you can see a preview of where it's going to go on the ground, and then when you click it will confirm. And I'll also probably want lock-on spells where you can lock onto a player, but that might be a little bit further down the line too. But for now I want it to be I click and then I see this preview as I move my cursor around, and then once I'm aiming somewhere valid and I left click, it will confirm and it'll summon this pillar of flame that might then do an explosion upwards or something. I don't know. It's in progress, like I said. But for the 4 that I've actually got working, you'll notice here they each have some of the same things. So they each have this scriptable object which has the ID, the name, the icon, all the bits of data to do with this spell. And then they all have their materials for now, just to make them look different than each other. We have the main bulk of everything here, which is the actual spell behavior object, which has the graph on explaining how it all works. Now, I don't actually know why it says it's all broken because I just showed it all working. Maybe I need to rebuild the visual scripting. 1 second. Okay, I've regenerated it. Let's try again, and yep, it's working. So in the actual spell casting script that handles input and then, figuring out, okay, you pressed the left mouse button, so let's do the basic attack spell. That will then trigger this event, which enters here. It puts the spell on cooldown, it consumes a basic attack charge, and all these things are subgraphs. So a subgraph is just a graph you can make that you can then reuse. And you'll see here, I made this graph have the input and output flow, and then the input takes in a spell. So wherever we use this node, we can pass in a spell, and it will get the spell caster, and then from there it will get the cooldown handler and it will put it on cooldown and then continue. And this just saves me, let's say, 3 nodes into one. I can put these 3 nodes into one node because every time I want to put a spell on cooldown, I don't want to have to remember to add this node, then this node, then this node. Just this whole thing as a subgraph, like this. Same for consuming a basic attack charge. It's pretty much the same, just saves a lot of space here, and it means refactoring later is much easier. And then we play an animation for every client, and I can pass in the name of the animation here. And finally, it will tell the server we want to launch this projectile. I've called it launch projectile owner because you call this from the owner. And it takes the dummy spawnable index, aiming, xtilt, and force. So these are all just, well, the force obviously determines how fast the projectile will move. The tilt offset, because I've got spells with gravity, I want to aim them up a little bit so then they can fall. Because if I just fire them straight, they'll just plummet straight to the ground and basically never hit, so it's not very good. And then the dummy spawnable index is, if we go back here, every spell has a list of game objects you can put in, and this is just to store anything this spell might need to spawn in. And because everyone, all the clients have this data, if the server tells you spawn in 0 or spawn in 5, you can go to this list and get that object, which will be fine as long as the client and the server are on the same version, all will be good. And then if we head over here and we look back in the graph, the owner then tells the server, I want to do this. The server then receives it in a script, and the script triggers this event, and I can control it here. And all I want to do with this spell is just launch the projectile on the server. And the reason why the client is handling stuff like putting it on cooldown, consuming the attack charges and stuff like that, is because at the moment the multiplayer framework doesn't have built-in lag compensation and client-side prediction. So I tried doing it the proper way originally, where the server handles everything, but then we've got all this delay between the client thinking the spell's on cooldown or not and the server thinking otherwise. Same with the attack charges and playing animations. So further down the line, I will want to move this to be more server authoritative, because right now this could be cheated quite easily by someone who knows what they're doing. But for now, while I'm in development, I'm not too bothered. I just want to get things working rather than dwelling too much on cheaters. But yes, further down the line, I will want to move most of this to the server once I don't have to build lag compensation from scratch, because I don't want to do that now. I want to focus on making a fun game with cool abilities. And if we close this now and move over to the projectiles, you see here we have the explosion, which is just the bigger circle. That's purely visual. That shows the AoE. We've got the base, which is, if we look over here, the size of the projectile, the lifetime of it, and for detecting collisions. And then we have prefab variants here. We've got the dummy version, which is just the visual. So it's got the red sphere. It has obviously the same scripts because it's a variant of the prefab, the base prefab. And it has logic here for saying, okay, what happens on client side when the projectile hits something? Well, we grab the explosion, we spawn it in at this position with this rotation, and then we destroy it. That's it. We just spawn in an explosion and destroy this object. And then if we look at the non-dummy version, it's very similar again. It doesn't have visuals because it's just for the logic. And if we open this up, this happens to take the thing we collided with, deals damage to it, deals direct damage, 10, and then there's a physics overlap sphere, and then ends up doing 15 damage to everything in that radius. So we basically loop over everything in our overlap sphere and deal damage to it. We also apply the status effect, burn status effect, which is a scriptable object we'll see over here. It's doing 3 damage per tick at a tick rate of 2. So I've set up status effects too. Currently I only have damage over time, but I will have healing over time and slowing and stunning and all the other kind of things you'd expect. And before I end up creating another AoE spell, I will want to take probably most of these nodes and put them in a subgraph, because doing actual like physics overlap sphere and looping over stuff, of course I can keep that in here, but I imagine I'll have to repeat that quite a bit with spells doing AoE damage. So I'll be able to refactor that soon into its own subgraph. And that might seem like quite a bit just to get a simple spell like that working, but whilst it did take me a long time to get all this set up, when I moved on to make Wind Slash, it was so much easier because the spell spawns in pretty much the same way. It just has a different spell. For now, the same animation. It uses a different projectile, a different force. You just change all the numbers, but it's set up pretty much the same way. And then the projectile is pretty much the same, except it doesn't have AoE or burning. It just takes the thing it hits, deals damage, destroys itself. Done. And that's it. That's the Wind Slash. And then the Rock Toss, almost the same again. This time the projectile actually does use gravity. But apart from that, the actual spawning of it is... Actually, no, I forgot. Almost the same. It would be the same if it was the water spell, but because this one has casting, it's a bit different. Instead of doing all the cooldown stuff and basic attack charges instantly, we start casting immediately. Then when casting has completed, we do all the things that we were going to do anyway, and then we do the spawning on the server. So instead of just going straight into this lot here, we do the cast first, and we've got a script to actually handle casting, which then triggers this casting completed event when it's finished. And finally, I go over to the water bolt, and if we look at this, it's pretty much the same as the two that don't have casting. So at the moment, I really have two variations, just a projectile with casting and a projectile without. So that seems to me like I might actually be able to refactor this, because I think they're all the same, just with different parameters. They all put on cooldown, consume base attack, plane animation, launch projectile. So if I could move all those into one subgraph and just plug all the values in, that might be a good idea. I'll have to think about that, but yeah. So yeah, that's about everything that I got done. Of course, there's quite a lot of coding that I've just not shown this time because it would make the video far too long. But if there is anything here you're curious on how to make, be sure to let me know down below. I've released this video early in the week, so I'll have a look at the responses and decide for the tutorial later in the week what it's going to be about, so be sure to let me know down below. If you like this video, then be sure to leave a like and subscribe, it would help a lot. Thanks as always for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye. But of course, before I go, I've got to thank my patrons. A special thanks to Alan W., Francisco Lira, Sahayla, John Janigan Mills, Benjamin Hilder, David McDermott, Evan Maxey, Georgia Pierce, Katinka Mom, Lawrence Simpson, Malvin, Mark McCockle, Mike Miller, Rack, Andrew Williams, Theory, and Dario. If anyone else is able to help support the channel monetarily, the link to Patreon is down below. If not, there are also links down below to other social media such as Twitch, Twitter, and Discord. If you could help us out by following on any of those or checking any of those out, that'd be greatly appreciated. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.